All right, welcome to the second video lesson on circles. Before we get started, what's round, fierce, and roams the high sea? A pirate, of course. Yarr. So in the exploration, or you should have done some kind of exploration around pi, you will have learned that pi, this number that we like to celebrate in March, is the ratio of the circumference over the diameter. No matter what your circle is, if it's a circle, if you divide the circumference, the distance around, by the diameter, then you're going to get pi. Let me just give you another demonstration of that, another way to see that. I have a circle here, and I'm going to use this piece of string to measure the diameter. Put a little bit of tape on it to help it stick. And I'm just going to put a mark where the diameter is. Okay. So now if I take this diameter and I wrap it around the circle, start right here, how many times do you think it's going to fit in? So here's one time. Take that off. And here's a second time. Kind of line it up there. Okay. And there is a third time. So it goes in 3 times, and there's just a little bit left over. It's in between a 10th and a 5th. So 1 time, 2 times, 3 times with a little bit left over. And this is actually going to be about 0.14. So we can see from this diagram that the diameter goes into the circumference 3.1415926 and so on times. That's the definition of pi. It's how many times the diameter goes into the circumference. We can take this fact and we can turn it into something that's actually really useful. Because we can say, okay, I know pi is the circumference of the diameter. What if I wanted to solve for the circumference? What if I wanted to find a formula for the circumference? Well, if we multiply both sides of this equation by the diameter, d, then what you're going to get left with is pi times the diameter is equal to the circumference, c. And that's the formula for circumference. It's pi times the diameter. Circumference is take whatever the diameter is, multiply it by 3.14159 or whatever you're using, and that will give you the circumference. But we can go even further than that because you also know that a diameter is 2 times the radius. So we can come up with a different formula for circumference. Circumference is equal to, plug in the 2 times the radius where the diameter is, pi times 2 times r. And usually mathematicians write it like this, 2 pi r. So that's the other formula for circumference. So the formula to find the circumference of a circle is pi times the diameter, c equals pi times the diameter, or c equals 2 times pi times the radius. And you have already discovered this, but pi is the ratio between a circle's circumference and its diameter. And it's an irrational number, approximately equal to 3.14. We could write out more digits, 3.14159265535, and so on. In fact, though, this isn't actually equal to pi. This is just 20, 30 digits of pi. Pi is going to go on infinitely without repeating. The only way to exactly represent pi is with this symbol, pi. By the way, if sometimes students struggle to write the symbol pi, I like to do it just by making 2 vertical lines. They're kind of parallel. And then I do a little squiggle on top. You could equally do 2 parallel lines and then just give it a roof. That's totally fine too. Okay, let's do some practice together using this formula. For each of these, we're going to make sure that we show our algebra line by line and that we start with the formula. And so this actually starts with this image here. We need to identify what it is that we have. One thing I like to always do is to identify that this is the radius. Remember the radius, the circle. If we have a circle, if it cuts all the way across, that D is the diameter. But if it's just that little part, it's the radius. So we have the radius here. So that means it's going to probably be most convenient for us to use the radius formula. Let's start with that. C is equal to 2 pi r. Okay, now that we've got the formula, let's substitute in. C is equal to 2 times pi times 7. And we can simplify. Let's simplify these numbers first. C is equal to 14 pi. And here's where, once we've got to this point, we're going to make an approximation, use an approximation for pi. And so we're going to substitute that in now. C is equal to 14 times 3.14. And okay, use a calculator for this. 14 times 3.14. C, and actually we should put a little squiggly equals because this is approximately now. C is equal to 43.96 units. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we have a bunch of different answers here, and we need to select all of the ones that could be used to represent the circumference. We already know that 14 is incorrect. By the way, let's change this 8 to a 6 here. It should be a 6. So 14 is incorrect. It's definitely not that. 44, yeah, if we rounded, it could be that. It's about 44. Equally, 43.96. Both of these are approximations. But there's another correct answer here. It's not 43.96 pi. That makes it incorrect, because we don't take 43.96 and multiply by pi. It's 14 pi. Because we wrote down C is equal to 14 times pi. These two answers are approximations. They're numbers only. This is an answer in terms of pi. And sometimes you'll need to write your answer in terms of pi. Sometimes you'll need to approximate, rounding. Okay, let's look at another problem. Jalen has a job as an architect and is designing the circular atrium of a new hotel. He wants the diameter of the room to be 50 feet. What is the distance around the room? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth of a foot. Okay, a couple things here as I'm rereading this. The diameter is 50 feet. I'm just going to make a note of that. And he wants the distance around the room. That means he's looking for the circumference. Okay, and we got to round the nearest hundredth. So we're not going to find an answer in terms of pi. It is always helpful when you have a geometry problem with no picture to draw a quick sketch. Remember that this is the diameter, so it's going across. The diameter is 50 feet. Okay, now let's choose our formula. Since we have the diameter, we're going to use the diameter version of the circumference formula. C is equal to pi d. We could use 2 pi r if you want to divide the diameter by 50. That would work too, but it's quicker to just use the diameter formula. Now let's substitute in. C is equal to pi times 50. Okay, and if I wanted it in terms of pi, I could stop right here, 50 pi feet. But I want to approximate it, so I'm going to use 3.14. Let's do that squiggly equal sign because this is approximately 3.14 times 50. Okay. And now let's see what we get. 3.14 times 50, 157. Even though that doesn't have a decimal, it's still approximately, because we used a decimal approximation of pi. We didn't use exactly pi. And do not forget the units. 157 feet is the circumference. All right, you are going to go on to some practice. In this practice, you're going to start out with this table. And for each problem, what you need to do is you need to first find the diameter and the radius and draw it into the picture. You should have a picture that shows a diameter going across and also shows a radius like this. So use these numbers to figure out the others. Then I want you to find the circumference in terms of pi. So that means your answers will have pi in it. Delicious pie in those answers. And then here, you're going to find the circumference rounded to the nearest hundredth. I want you to use pi is approximately equal to 3.14. So whatever you get for this answer, round it by approximating pi equals 3.14. Okay? Good luck.